Greetings. Do without wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to another Magic in Theory and Practice video. Today we'll be discussing Chapter 14 of Magic in Theory and Practice of the Consecrations, with an account of the nature and nurture of the magical link. And as I've already discussed at length the concept of consecration, see link in the description below, I will bypass that part of the chapter and dive right into the magical link. So to start, this was a concept my own teacher was very fond of, and one he applied in a unique way with his students. After much time in training, once mentorship was respected and friendship was formed, he would guide each of us in our connection to him. He would make sure during each of our phone calls to help and reinforce our visualization of a silver cord of astral light protruding from our heart center to his heart center. For him and I was in Brooklyn, New York at the time, and he was in Portland, Oregon. The silver cord of light would extend from our hearts, traversing the nearly 3,000 miles of land and air to connect our souls together. Over the years, I have not kept up this practice in my attempts at mentorship, as it just never felt appropriate. But with him, it really did. Our soul connection is something special that, unless experienced, it's really hard to describe how it feels. Its purpose is to allow the magical guidance to work much stronger than without it. Often he would extend his temple space from his home to mine on the astral plane, so clearly that we could each see and describe the contents of each other's rooms, and even describe the clothing that each of us was wearing. Also, this cord helped ease the way karma was paid, as he took the brunt of it first and would guide me through what he knew was coming. He also worked healing spells through it on a physical and emotional level quite often, and that was something he was quite fond of doing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This is a very particular type of magical link. But what is the magical link in general? How can it be used? And why is it important enough that Crowley dedicated over half a chapter to the concept? To answer these questions, let's turn our attention to the text. Section 2 of Chapter 14 begins about the magical link, quote, "Let us try to make considerations of the nature of magic in a strictly scientific spirit, as well as, deprived of the guidance of antiquity, we may. What is a magical operation? It may be defined as any event in nature which is brought to pass by will. We must not exclude potato growing or banking from our definition." End quote. See my Chapter 0 of Magic in Theory and Practice video for an in-depth definition of magic according to Aleister Crowley. Quote, "Let us take a very simple example of a magical act, that of a man blowing his nose. What are the conditions of the success of the operation? Firstly, that the man's will should be to blow his nose. Secondly, that he should have a nose capable of being blown. Thirdly, that he should have at his command an apparatus capable of expressing his spiritual will in terms of material force, and applying that force to the object which he desires to effect. His will may be as strong and concentrated as that of Jupiter, and his nose may be totally incapable of resistance. But unless the link is made by the use of his nerves and muscles in accordance with psychological, physiological, and physical law, the nose will remain unblown through all eternity." End quote. So in this example, the magical link is the means by which the will of the magician and the action thereof are completed by union, i.e., one needs muscle command of their body to lift a tissue to blow their nose, fulfilling their will in this scenario. The muscle movement is the link by which subject, the will to blow the nose, and the object, the tissue, are brought into union. Then force is applied at the proper point, i.e. the sinuses. Crowley then writes, quote, "Writers of magic have been unsparing in their efforts to instruct us in the preparation of the will, but they seem to have imagined that no further precaution was necessary. I refer to Christian Science and the cognate doctrines of mental healing and the like. The theory of such people, stripped of dogmatic furbelows, is perfectly good magic of its kind. The idea is correct enough. Matter is an illusion created by will through mind, and consequently susceptible of alteration at the behest of its creator. But the practice has been lacking. They have not developed a scientific technique for applying the will." End quote. It is all too common that people who claim to practice magic are doing no more than merely wishing through prayer for things to happen. much like a person praying to God whether to win the lottery or to find their keys. They are merely wishing that something happens, but are not actually doing anything on the physical plane through a ritual act to make that happen, nor are they aware of how their thoughts affect the subtle planes around them. While I concede that if a person does some minor spell, and if their karma aligns with their desired outcome, then their outcome may come to fruition. After all, abracadabra, I create as I speak. Thoughts and words affect the astral plane, and if the proper thought form on the astral is charged in the correct manner, then a magical child may be produced, which can go on to manifest and affect the physical plane. But that is not magic in many cases, it is more wish fulfillment. Magic, more often than not, requires will and action on the earth plane, not just the ethereal. I say to newcomers often, that if you're not willing to go do whatever it is you plan on doing spell work to accomplish, then do not even bother. For even in cases where a magical operation is negligibly outlined, and one is doing mere wish fulfillment as I've described, once you set forces into motion, you may find yourself compelled beyond your awareness to go and do things whereby your original intent then comes to fruition. Really, this lack of awareness and understanding is the problem in most cases. People want things, but are not willing to use their hands to make such and such happen. For example, in the case of black magic, i.e. causing harm to somebody, if one summons a low spirit to go and hurt someone, but they do so because they are afraid of hurting that person themselves or facing the consequences of their actions, then truly they had better not do it. For starters, you are forcing a spirit for which you are a higher life form, and are bound to help raise these lowly spirits up from their demoralized stations, to go and hurt someone. You, in this case, are actually forcing them to do something that brings them ill karma, and not only hurts them and your desired target, but yourself and your soul as well by taking on the karma of hurting a person and the spirit all at once. I'll go into this concept more later on. To continue about the astral light, quote, "It is deplorable that nobody should have recorded in a systematic form the results of our investigations of the astral light. We have no account of its properties or of the laws which obtain in its sphere, yet these are sufficiently remarkable. We may briefly notice that, in the astral light, two or more objects can occupy the same space at the same time without interfering with each other or losing their outlines." End quote. Here is useful information based on everything I've given you so far. But just be careful how you use this medium. Nothing is free. Everything has a price. And we are all God experiencing itself. So if you use this method of the magical link, magic in general, to harm somebody, to hate another is really to hate yourself. We are all individual perspectives of the same thing. So those who have hate in their hearts prove their ignorance of the understanding of the universe, and are not respectable occultists at all. In the rare exceptions where it is one's will to go to war, that is another case altogether, and one highly misunderstood by most. See the Bhagavad Gita, for which I have no time to explain here. But, on Crowley's mention of black magic regarding the magical link, which he does in this chapter, there is a major sense of wish fulfillment going into the process of spellcasting to cause harm to someone or manifestation of some desired thing. At the very least, the astral light needs to be fully understood, and your ability to work on that plane is pretty much mandatory for absolute success. Further, he mentions that in such cases, the use of physical representations, wax images, or by utilizing blood magic, can give the physical power in some cases for thought forms to turn from mere thought into astral form, connect with the physical plane, and ultimately manifest. Crowley makes a point in connection with the astral light to artists and their chosen mediums. What a painter creates on their canvas is an outward expression of their internal world. Much like the body is an expression of the astral light within each of us, our body conforms to the shape brought on by experience, karma, and mental shaping of that light, both conscious and unconscious. All occult symbols, too, reflect nature, and likewise are expressions of what we coin the truth or inward reality behind or underlying the physical world. And this, too, is the magical link. Think of it like this. The source of creation, the divine light, Ein Sof, or God, is the most inward. The body of the individual, physical matter, and the like, is the outward expression of that highest origin of life. The Astral Light is the medium, the magical link between these two things, being and non-being. Therefore, when you alter one, you alter all three, save that beyond these there is a source of union beyond anything, the zero, the limitlessness, which cannot ever be altered. In our magical quest of attainment, we work by altering the external through various means until we have worked our way to the unchangeableness, and such would be called the attainment of nirvana, absolute perfection, or the like, and one no longer need do anything. They would have attained the way of the Tao at that point. These next quotes are lengthy, but reinforce the previous ideas and allow us to move past them, so just please bear with me. Quote, "Such are a few of the principal characteristics of Astral Light. Its quantitative laws are much less dissimilar from those of material physics. Magicians have too often been foolish enough to suppose that all classes of magical operations were equally easy. They seem to have assumed that the almighty power of God was an infinite quantity in presence of which all finites were equally insignificant. One day is with the Lord as 1,000 years is the first law of motion. Faith can move mountains, they say, and disdain to measure either the faith or the mountains. If you could kill a chicken by magic, why not destroy an army with equal exertion? With God all things are possible. This absurdity is an error of the same class as that mentioned above. The facts are wholly opposed. 2 and 2 make 4 in the astral as rigorously as anywhere else. The distance of one's magical target and the accuracy of one's magical rifle are factors in the success of one's magical shooting in just the same way as at Bisley. The law of magical gravitation is as rigid as that of Newton. The law of inverse squares may not apply, but some such law does apply. So it is for everything. You cannot produce a thunderstorm unless the materials exist in the air at the time, and a magician who could make rain in the Cumberland might fail lamentably in the Sahara. One might make a talisman to win the love of a shopgirl and find it work, yet be baffled in the case of a countess, or vice versa. One might impose one's will on a farm and be crushed by that of a city, or vice versa. The Master Therion himself, with all his successes in every kind of magic, sometimes appears utterly impotent to perform feats which almost any amateur might do, because he has matched his will against that of the world, having undertaken a work of a magus to establish the word of his law on the whole of mankind. He will succeed without doubt, but he hardly expects to see more than a sample of his product during his present incarnation. But he refuses to waste the least fraction of his force on works foreign to his work. However obvious it may seem to the onlooker that his advantage lies in commanding stones to become bread, or otherwise making things easy for himself." End quote. So, one may ask, is magic capable of affecting the physical world by ritual alone? The answer, yes, but only if conditions allow, and karma aligns, and many other factors are fully understood. Not to mention, magic, true magic as outlined by Tomega Therion, is not simply about manifesting anything. It is more like yoga in its desired end goal, that being to use ritual to attain first self-knowledge, then understanding of one's will, and finally to achieve union, period. Along the way you do gain abilities and goals to do ritual to make things happen, but these are usually byproducts and not the goal itself. Crowley next turns our attention briefly to Thelema in the Book of the Law. He writes that Libra El is a lamen, dictated by his holy guardian angel Aiwass, and upon the lamen is the word of the Aeon Thelema. Tomega Therion gave this book life by, quote, devoting his own life thereunto. We may then regard this talisman, the law, as the most powerful that has been made in the world's history, for previous talismans of the same type have been limited in their scope by conditions of race and country. Muhammad's talisman, Allah, was good only from Persia to the Pillars of Hercules. The Buddha's Anatta operated only in the south and east of Asia. The new talisman, Thelema, is master of the planet. But now observe how the question of the magical link arises. No matter how mighty the truth of Thelema, it cannot prevail unless it is applied to any by mankind. As long as the Book of the Law was in manuscript, it could only affect the small group amongst whom it was circulated. It had to be put into action by the magical operation of publishing it. When this was done, it was done with proper perfection. Its commands as to how the work ought to be done were not wholly obeyed. There were doubt and repugnance in Frater Perdurabo's mind, and they hampered his work. He was half-hearted. Yet, Even so, that intrinsic power of the truth of the law and the impact of the publication were sufficient to shake the world so that a critical war broke out, and the minds of men were moved in a mysterious manner. When the book of the law and its comment is published, with the forces of his whole will in perfect obedience to the instructions which have been up to now misunderstood or neglected, the results will be incalculably effective. The event will establish the kingdom of the crowned and conquering child over the whole earth, and all men shall bow to the law, which is love under will." End quote. So this is an extreme case, that of a magus, but there is one law only to govern the small as the great. The same laws describe the measures and motions of the ant and the stars. Their light is no swifter than that of a spark. In every operation of magic the link must be properly made. Quote, "These considerations being thoroughly understood, we may return to the question of making the magical link." End quote. Depending upon the will and intent, the necessary force and mediums must be harnessed and applied. Quote, "We cannot use the force of steam directly to impel an aeroplane or to get drunk. We must apply it in adequate strength in an appropriate manner." End quote. Crowley gives us a few more examples. Quote, "It is therefore absurd to invoke the spirit of Venus to procure the love of an empress, unless we take measures to transmit the influence of our work to the lady. We may, for example, consecrate a letter expressing our will, or, if we know how, we may use the same object connected with the person whose acts we are attempting to control, such as a lock of hair or a handkerchief once belonging to her, and so in subtle connection with her aura. But for material ends, it is better to have material means." End quote. He makes a point of using love and an empress in this example because the letter Daleth corresponds with Venus and Atu-3 the empress. A conjuration combined with a physical representation, or at bare minimum a letter consecrated as a talisman, would be much more likely to have an effect over simply thinking her love for you into existence. Which is why that book called The Secret to me is absolute trash, and I tell people just to stay away from it. You're going to end up doing more damage to yourself than good. Quote, "Our will is to kill a tiger, poorly conveyed by a charge of small shot fired at a range of 100 yards. Our talisman must, therefore, be an object suitable to the nature of our operation, and we must have some such means of applying its force to such a way as will naturally compel the obedience of the portion of nature which we are trying to change. If one will the death of a sinner, it is not sufficient to hate him, even if we grant that the vibrations of thought, when sufficiently powerful and pure, may modify the astral light sufficiently to impress its intentions to a certain extent on such people as happen to be sensitive. It is much surer to use one's mind and muscle in service of that hate by devising and making a dagger and then applying the dagger to the heart of one's enemy. One must give one's hate a bodily form of the same order as that which one's enemy has taken for his manifestation." End quote. So you see, to do magic effectively, one must meet the following criteria. 1. You must have enough self-knowledge to formulate your will. 2. You must devise a means by which to do that will. 3. Then link the object of your will and the will itself via the astral light or other suitable means. Quote, "Remember that magic includes all acts soever. Anything may serve as a magical weapon. To impose one's will on a nation, for instance, one's talisman may be a newspaper, one's triangle a church, or one's circle a club. To win a woman, one's pentacle may be a necklace. To discover a treasure, one's wand may be a dramatist's pen, or one's incantation a popular song. Many ends, many means. It is only important to remember the essence of the operation, which is to will its success with sufficiently pure intensity, and to incarnate that will in a body suitable to express it. A body such that its impact on the bodily expression of the idea one wills to change is to cause it to do so." End quote. Again, understanding Hermetic Kabbalah and how to use the Magician's Tables helps greatly in this matter, as does a full course of Hermetic magic as per a Golden Dawn-based order, such as AA, or there are many other Golden Dawn-based Thelemic orders out there. If you know the proper symbolism of the Magician's Tables and weapons, you can make on the mundane plane many things your magical apparatus. A pen can be a wand depending on how you use it. If you sign a treaty and bring countries into alliance, a pen is a leader's wand. When the logo of a business is properly consecrated, it could be one's lamen. If your will is to explore a new cave system, a flashlight can act as your magical lamp. It may seem trivial at first what I'm saying, but when you have gotten to the core of who you are as an individual, and go out to do what your nature is suited to accomplish, then there is joy in life, and the tools you need to accomplish your will become extensions of your soul. What could be more exciting and less trivial than that? Crowley gives several more examples, including winning the heart of a person one is in love with, and also recovering a stolen watch, which there is no way to make an actual link to the thief as they stole the object without revealing themselves. The latter case is more interesting and a new subject, so let's just analyze that a little bit. Even if I do not know who stole my watch, quote, I know it to be a mind fundamentally like my own, and I try to make a magical link with it by advertising my loss in the hope of reaching it, being careful to calm it by promising it immunity to the stealing, and to appeal to its own known motive by offering a reward. I also attempt to use the opposite formula, to reach it by sending my familiar spirits, the police, to hunt it and compel its obedience by threats. The ceremonial method would be to transfer the watch, linked naturally to me by possession and use, a thought calculated to terrify the thief and induce him to get rid of it at once. Observing clairsentiently this effect, suggest relief and reward as a result of restoring it. End quote. So to save space, there are several more examples, but I suggest you read them on your own. I will only merely quote this one useful piece of information to contemplate for now. Quote, but, as a mystic, he knows that all things are phantoms of one thing, and that they may be withdrawn therein to reissue into other attire. He knows that all things are in himself, and that he is all one with the all. End quote. So now let's skip to the end of the chapter and attempt to conclude this subject. Quote, all such magic demands the utmost precision in practice. It is true that the best rituals give us instructions in selecting our vehicle of force. In 777 we find correspondences of many classes of being with the various types of operation, so that we know what weapons, jewels, figures, drugs, perfumes, names, etc. to employ in any particular work. But it has always been assumed that the invoked force is intelligent and competent, that it will direct itself as desired without further ado, by this method of sympathetic vibrations. The necessity of timing the force has been ignored, and so most operations, even when well performed as far as invocation goes, are as harmless as igniting loose gunpowder. But even allowing that will is sufficient to determine the direction and prevent the dispersion of that force, we can hardly be sure that it will act on its own object, unless that object be properly prepared to receive it. The link must be perfectly made. The object must possess in itself a sufficiency to stuff sympathetic to our work. We cannot make love to a brick or set an oak to run errands. End quote. In short, magic must act in harmony with physical laws and be sympathetic to that which is being worked with or upon. Quote, we see then that we can never affect anything outside ourselves, save only as it is also within us. Whatever I do to another, I do also to myself. If I hurt or kill a man, I destroy my own life at the same time. End quote. Side note, this is why I caution others when asked about, hey, what do you think about hexing someone? My response is always the same. First, we are all God experiencing itself from unique perspectives. We are the same thing. To hate someone is to hate a part of yourself. To hurt someone is like destroying a clump of cells in your abdomen in an attempt to cure a headache. Further, karma will work itself out regardless. If someone wrongs you, they will deal with the result of their infraction of the law. To take their karma into your own hands is to get their muck all over yourself. Rather than let the universe teach them as it is designed to do, you take their karma into your own hands, causing yourself karma for your actions against them, and really, all you could do is speed up their karma anyway, which they would have experienced regardless. Now, in the rare case where you feel it is honestly worth hurting yourself to go hurt somebody, and is somehow aligned with your will, then sure, of course it's permissible. After all, to stop the spread of gangrene, amputation is sometimes necessary. In cases not so severe, if you understand that you are absolutely willing to pay for acting upon someone else's karma, and pay the price for doing so, then you are free to do what you will. Just know that nothing is free, everything has a price, and what you pay for, you own. And again, I refer you to the Bhagavad Gita. In the case where it's somebody's will to be a general or a leader, and their nation and their people are getting, captured and enslaved and they have to go to war, that's a much different subject as somebody stepped on my shoe and I'm gonna go hex them. There's a big difference there, and if you can't see that, you might need to maybe seek therapy or check yourself or something. But again, in using magical rituals for mundane ones, it is much better to take a course in serious bhakti yoga and learn to understand the idea that on the spiritual path, one of devotion, what you need will be provided, and you need not waste your time and effort manifesting impermanent things. These will be provided by whatever your highest godly ideal is, and you can then spend your time achieving union with it rather than feeding your nefesh. I realize not everyone has the will in their lifetime to finally come to union. Many still need to play with things of the earth for as long as they need to, and that under the law is also permissible. So just know thyself and do your will. It's that simple. In closing, quote, "There is thus some justification for the assumption of previous writers on magic that the link is implicit and needs no special attention. Yet, in practice, there is nothing more certain than that one ought to confirm one's will by all possible acts on all possible planes. The ceremony must not be confined to the formally magical rites. We must neglect no means to our end, neither despising our common sense nor doubting our secret wisdom." End quote. Love is the law, love under will. I'll see you all in the next one.